So the first thing to do, like I said, we want to solve this problem using iteration, right? So we need to understand the structure of this problem. We understand that we are finding factorial. Factorial means 6 factorial means 6 times 5 times 4. That means this number is decreasing, isn't it? And gets to what? To 1. So that means if I want to find the factorial of n, where n is any number, is that understood? I need to get this number or get a range of numbers from n to what? To 1. Is that understood? That means I need to get a range of number from n to 1. So two things should come to your mind, either for loop or while. But as me, who is not a very smart student, I like for loop because it's straightforward compared to while loop. Is that understood? So what should come to my mind is what? Is a for loop. Is that understood? Why am I using a for loop? Because I want to access each of the value. So the first thing, generate a what? A range of values from n to 1. And how do you generate a range of value from n to 1? What function are you going to use? The range function. Then use the for loop to take one of each values, isn't it? So the first thing to do is that I need a range function. A range of what? Of n, isn't it? Because range of n will generate values from 0 to n minus 1. Yes or yes? Because if you write range of 5, this will give you values from what? 0 to 4. But is that what we have here? No. Because this range of 5 will not include the last value, isn't it? And it starts from where? From 0. But am I supposed to start from 0? No. Where am I supposed to start from? 1. Because I want to go from that number up to 1. Is that understood? So that means I should use range of what? 1, n. 1, n is still wrong, isn't it? Because this will stop at what? At the value less than 1, isn't it? It will get to that value. Is that correct? So it should be 1 to what? N plus 1. So range from 1 to n plus 1, what does this mean? It starts from where? 1. And it ends at where? N plus 1. It ends at n. Is that understood? Because when you use range, it will not include the last value, isn't it? But because you wrote n plus 1, the last value is n plus 1. So it will stop at n. So with this will give you a range of number from 1 up to what? Up to n, which is the same thing you want to achieve with this expression. Is this understood? So now that we know that, we now want to take each value and multiply them by each other. So that means for loop should come to my mind, or what? Or while loop. Is that understood? But it's straightforward. For loop is kind of very straightforward. What do I need for loop? To take each of the value. So that means I need to write for num in range of what? 1 to n plus 1. So this can iterate between 1 to what? To that number. Is that understood? What am I trying to do? Multiply. So I can only multiply two numbers. I can't multiply everything because I need to what? I can only multiply one after the other. So that means I need to put all the multiplication in one variable. Is that understood? So let me take that variable as what? As product. And that means I will take that product as what? As 1, not 0. Because I am multiplying. If I'm adding, I have to make it 0. Because if I make it 0, it will not affect my final answer. Because I was adding. Is that understood? But because if I make it 0 now, it will affect. Because anything multiplied by 0 is what? Is 0. I have to make it 1. Because anything multiplied by 1 will give that thing, isn't it? And when you add anything to 0, it also gives that thing. So because I'm multiplying, I should make that variable as what? As 1. Is that understood? So after doing this, then I come here and write that product is equal to product times what? Times n. Times num rather. And that is all. It's as simple as that. So that when num will start from where, everyone? 1 and not 0, isn't it? It starts from 1. Then it takes 1, multiply by what? By 1, because product was 1, isn't it? That gives what? 1. It goes back and take what? Num equals to 2, and multiply by what? By multiply what? 2 by the previous product. And what is the previous product? 1. So that is 2 times 1, which is the previous product, isn't it? It goes back and take num equals to what? 3, and multiply 3 by what? By the previous product. What is the previous product? It's 1 times 2. So it has taken this. Is that understood? It goes back and takes the next num, which is now what? 4, and multiply it by what? By the previous product, which is now what? 4 times 6. Is that understood? It goes back and take what? N equals to 5. Num equals to 5, isn't it? And does what? Multiply it by the previous product. What is the previous product? 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Is that understood? It now goes back and take n equals to what? Num equals to what? 6. And multiply it to what? By the previous product. Is that understood? And that becomes what? 6 times 120. Is that understood? So by the time it gets there, that is the end of the for loop, because it will not get to n plus 1. It's as simple as that. Then when you are done, then you do what? Then you print the product. Do you know that you are factored for 0 factorial? Because the factorial of 0 is what? 1. So if n is 0, will it even iterate through this for loop? No. What will it print? Product. And what was product? 1. It just prints 1. That is all. Is that understood? It just prints 1, and that is all. You can also use a while loop for this, but I think this for loop is kind of shorter compared to while loop, isn't it? And that's why I like for loop. If you want to use while loop, you have to write a condition where that loop have to stop, isn't it? You have to write while the number is greater than 0, and you now decrease it in the while loop, isn't it? You decrease the number in the while loop. Well, yeah, I don't have to decrease the number. The for loop will do that. It will increase it by itself. So while loop is like going from 6 to 1. For loop is like going from 1 to 6. The one you understand does apply. Okay. Now, what if the number is not a negative number? Can you find the factorial of a negative number?
No.
So there is no factorial for a negative number. So you can also factor it out. Okay. That if n is negative, you just return void or invalid or whatever instead of returning products. So you don't return products if n is negative. Is that understood? It's as easy as that and very simple. So going back to Visual Studio Code, then write that product is equal to 1. Or let me use a function. So def iterative factorial. Okay, then number. Then write that product is equal to 1, right? Then I need for num in range of 1 to what? To number plus 1, isn't it? Then I have this as what? Product is equal to what? Product multiplied by num. Okay. Then when I'm done, then I can return products. But this will not account for negative value, isn't it? So to account for negative value, I can write that if number is less than 0, so that I can also account for negative number. Is that understood? Then I return what do I return? -1. I cannot return a string because I need to return an integer later in the code. So I can only return a data type. So at the end of the day, when I get out of the function, then I can now account for whatever is returned. Okay. So else product is 1 and return products. Then after this, then I can call the function, isn't it? There is a value that will be returned, isn't it? Then I can write returned value is equal to iterative factorial, right? Then what get anything, maybe let's say 5. Okay. Now, after writing 5, a value, two set of value can be returned. Either the product is returned or -1 is returned. If -1 is returned, what does that mean? The input is what? Is a negative value. Is that understood? So that means I have to write that if if what? Returned value is equal to -1, then I can now print invalid input. Is this understood? Then I write what? Else. Then print returned value. Can you see that now? If I have returned a string here at this point, let's say return invalid. Here I will have written if what? Return value is equal to what? Is equal to invalid, isn't it? Is equal to invalid. Print what? Invalid input, right? Else, then print what? Return value. If it is not invalid, yeah, it's still correct. Both works. Okay, both works. Yeah. Is this understood, everyone? Okay, good. So if I run this code now, then I should have what? 120. So what if the input parameter is -1? Then I should have invalid inputs. So both works, whether you are returning two integer or two different data types, is fine. That was an error on my part. Sorry about that. Okay. Any question? So this is an iterative function to calculate for what? Factorial. So let's now go down to the recursive function. So for the recursive function, like I told you earlier, if you want to find 5 factorial, it is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is more or less saying 5 factorial is equal to what? 5 times 4 factorial. Yes or yes? Okay, since this is understood, so it may not be 5, it may be 6, it may be 7. Then I can also say that n factorial is equal to n multiplied by n minus 1 factorial. Is this correct? Is this correct? Now, like I told you, if you want to understand factorial, it's best to represent it in that mathematical form like I told you guys in the previous class. Okay? That n factorial is such that it is n minus 1 factorial. You can see the factorial is coming back again. That is like calling the function in the function. But so this is the what? This is the recursive case. Recursive case. So what we need to do? Set the what? The base case. And how do you set the base case? You must identify the base case, right? If you take a look at this expression, where does it end at? That means the base case is 1. Is that understood? The base case is what? 1. We can also say the base case is 0. Do you know? Okay, the base case is such that the n factorial will be equal to 1 if the number is equal to 1 or if the number is equal to 0. That's what I mean by 0. Because 0 factorial is also what? 1. 1 factorial is also what? Okay. So, like I said, we have to determine what? The base case, right? So we see that this is ending at 1. Then that should be the base case, isn't it? And also, when you also find 1 factorial, that should be what? 1. So you should also account for 0 factorial. But in this case, I did not account for what? For what? For negative value. You can also do that as well. Is that understood? That you can, if n is less than 1, you can also set it as a base case to return what? Anything, or to return -1. Is that understood? So, or to return invalid. You can also add this to your code. Is that understood? So this is, so when you can represent your information in this form, it's easier for you to write the code. Okay? Now let's write that now. So going back here, then I have DEF, recursive factorial, then number. Okay. After that, we need to set the base case, isn't it? So let's first account for the negative value. So we can write that if number is less than 0, return -1, and that is all. Return means that is the end of the function. It just stop. It's just like a break for a loop. Is that understood? Else, if 0 less than or equal to number less than or equal to 1. What does this mean? It means if the number is more than 0 or 0, and also what? If the number is between 0 and 1. That is number greater than or equal to 0, and also what? Number less than or equal to 1. That takes us to what? To this base case that we wrote here. If it is 0 or 1. Is this understood? Good. So if number is greater than or equal to 0 or number is less than or equal to 1, it's still the same thing as writing if 0 less than or equal to number less than or equal to 1. It's still the same thing. Okay. Now, after getting this, then we can now write that what? You return 1. Can you remember? Because if it is 0 or 1, what should you return? 1. Is that understood? Now, else, that is if it is what? More than 0. Is this understood? If it's more than 0 or more than 1, that is if it's more than 1, isn't it? What do? You now find the factorial. Is that understood? Or you record the function at that point. So you return number multiplied by the factorial of n minus 1, isn't it? And what is that factorial? The function. Recursive factorial of number minus 1. Is this understood? Yeah. Good. Now you return this. That is the end of the code. So we can call our function now as return value is equal to recursive factorial of what? Let's say 5. Then this can return -1 or anything, isn't it? Then you can now write that if what? The return value is equal to -1. Then what do? Print invalid. Okay. Else. Then print what? Print RET. Okay. So if you run this code now, then you should have your value printed as what? 120. Does everyone understand this code?